Hey everyone, welcome to the video. This one we're going over my core plays for week 14 of the NFL season on Draftkings. Before we continue though, if you guys could leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out, really appreciate it. I think we can get to 3K subscribers this weekend. Last weekend I probably got, anywhere from like 50 plus subscribers last weekend. I think we can hit 3K this week, so if we can, thank you guys very much. Even if we don't, half thank you, but I think we can do it. I do appreciate all the support on this channel. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at ChrisPinell16. And if you're interested in the spreadsheet I build every single week, links in the description below for my Patreon. All the statistics I use to make these videos, everything's color coded, nice and neat, projections, their values. I do cash rankings, I make a cheat sheet, wide receiver versus cornerback data, all that good stuff, and my Discord chat. Links in the description below for my Patreon. It's the beginning of the month, so if you do want to sign up, best time to do so. And that's enough plugging. I say we get right into the video. And also, I apologize if you were looking forward to the PowerPoint presentation format I usually do. I had a lot of presentations I had to make this week because it's like the final week of the semester. So I was a little bit PowerPoint presentation burned out. So I figured we'd just go to the DraftKings page. I still have all my usual notes, so I am fully prepared for this slate. I just want to let you guys know that's why we didn't have the slideshow this week. But hopefully next week we can get that back. All right, so let's get into this slate. And we're going to start off with the quarterback position. And I got to tell you, there's not a lot of quarterbacks I like on this slate. I mean, there's solid quarterbacks in good spots. It's just some I feel are a little bit overpriced. Some aren't in good matchups. Some are hard to trust. So when I feel like I don't like the quarterback position too much, I think there's two ways you can usually go. So you could spend all the way for Lamar Jackson, or you could spend all the way down for a guy, not all the way down, but pretty much all the way down for a guy we're going to talk about pretty soon here. But the first guy we got to talk about is Lamar Jackson. He is basically unfadable at this point. It doesn't matter who he plays or what the weather is. Nothing matters. It's Lamar Jackson's world, and we're all living it. The guy is straight out of a video game. He is the Madden 04 Michael Vick. I mean, that's what it is. He is unstoppable. He can do whatever he wants on the football field. He's averaging 8.75 rushing attempts per game. That's in 81 rushing yards per game as well. I want you guys to think about that. 81 rushing yards per game from a quarterback. He's basically starting you off with 2 passing touchdowns just as a baseline floor. Because, 80 yards equals 8 points, and passing touchdowns 4 points each. 2 passing touchdowns, 8 points. No other quarterback offers you anything close to that kind of floor, and his ceiling is absolutely unmatched. And if we just take a stroll through the game log, the guy has been absolutely insane. 26 points, 36, 32, 33, 28, 26, 33. He scored no less than 26 points since week 6. And his only clunker of a game this season was versus Pittsburgh, where he had 14. Everything else, he's been absolutely elite. 36, 33, 21, 26. You guys don't need me to just read off all these box scores. You guys know Lamar Jackson's great. And it's a tough matchup versus Buffalo, but who cares when it comes to Lamar Jackson? He smashed San Francisco for 26 points. That's one of the toughest matchups in the NFL. Then he had 28 versus New England, 36 versus the Rams. It doesn't matter who he's facing. Defenses can't stop him right now. They can't stop the Baltimore Ravens, probably the best team in the NFL right now. And the Buffalo Bills actually just gave up a monster game to Dak, although they were playing from behind. But still, I mean, Dak had a huge game, and I'll trust Lamar Jackson to have a huge game every single time he comes out in the field. And honestly, when you go look at a defense for Lamar Jackson, you kind of have to look how they are versus the run, and they are very beatable on the ground. The Bills are. They have a very, very good pass defense, but when it comes to running backs, I'm not saying Lamar Jackson is just a running back, but he's halfway a running back. He can still throw the ball just fine, but he's pretty much a running back, which is fine for fantasy purposes. He can throw the ball too. I just don't want to trigger anyone that's a big Lamar Jackson fan. I like Lamar Jackson. I think he's awesome, but he's pretty much half of a running back at this point, which is totally fine for fantasy. Yeah, they're 22nd DVOA versus the rush, and his O-line is so good. They have the best offensive line versus defensive line pass blocking matchup of the week, and the second best run blocking matchup. Lamar Jackson, when you plug him in your lineup, it's like you're playing an extra running back that has the ability to throw the ball. He is pretty much a cheat code at this point. So if you can fit Lamar Jackson in, and I gotta say the quarterbacks on this slate aren't completely that strong, I could definitely see him being a core play for you. So Lamar Jackson, definitely someone I have interest in. If I can afford him, I would be very happy being able to fit him in. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to afford him because I do have interest in some high-end running backs this week and some wide receivers. I typically try to pay down at quarterback when possible, but I gotta say, when I don't play Lamar Jackson, I feel like I'm at a big disadvantage because he's usually high-owned and he usually gets 30 points. So, I mean, Lamar Jackson, yes, if you can afford him, definitely want to get him in your lineups. Then After this, I think there's a lot of okay quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins going up against Detroit. That's obviously a great matchup. The guy has been great this season. He's not a core play for me, but he has been good. But I'm just not. 6,700 for Kirk Cousins feels a little too much. I think Deshaun Watson's going to be popular this week, but he is going up against a really, really good Denver pass defense. So I have a little bit of concern there, and he has shown the ability to not have the best of games in the world, but playing Denver at home is much better than going into the road in Denver and playing him there. So I do think Deshaun Watson is a fine play at 6,500. He seems a little bit too cheap there. Baker versus Cincinnati would make sense. Jameis versus Indy, that has one of the higher totals on the slate. I think he's pretty interesting. I mean, he's probably going to get you 300 plus yards, a couple of touchdowns, a couple interceptions, but I think he'll be fine. But the guy I want to talk about is Ryan Tannehill. And I got to say, Kyler Murray is pretty cheap. But Ryan Tannehill, he comes in at 5,800, and I do have interest here. There's not a lot of quarterbacks like this week, like I said, but he does find himself in a pretty good spot versus Oakland, and he's been very, very good, too. Last week wasn't that great, but they got to an early lead. They had 14 points, but before that, 33, 19, 28, 19, 23. He has been very consistently solid. Now, I do prefer playing Derrick Henry over Ryan Tannehill, but I think Ryan Tannehill can get you a game where he's got 200 some yards more than likely, and then 2 touchdowns, and I think that's just fine at his price tag. I don't think he kills you. He has rushing upside as well. I gotta say, he's not my favorite quarterback in the world, and I do think you could play guys like Baker, Jameis over him. I just think at 5,800, I think he's a nice, solid, get me 18 to 20 point kind of play. And he's not just dinking and dunking it either. He's been pretty aggressive. He's got the highest yards per attempt right now at 9.1 yards per attempt and a very good quarterback rating of 113. And the Titans also have a solid 25-point total, and their Oakland is 28th DVA versus the pass. They're allowing 23.1 points per game to quarterbacks, which is 6th most. They're allowing 275 passing yards and 2.25 touchdowns per game, which if Ryan Tannehill can just hit that average, I'll take 275 and 2 touchdowns from Ryan Tannehill. I'll take that all day because he's not breaking the bank either at 5,800. And even if Henry does take over this game like he has been, Tannehill still has been solid. I mean, Derrick Henry's had 4 great games in a row, and Tannehill 14, 33, 19, 28. He still had some good games, so I think they can both have good games here. And like I said, he has flash and rushing upside as well versus Jacksonville. He had 7 carries, 40 yards, 2 touchdowns. That was 4 for 38 versus Carolina, 3 for 37, 4 for 5 but versus Indy. But I think Ryan Tannehill is a fine, solid, safe play. I don't think he's a huge high upside guy, but if Derrick Henry's somehow doesn't get to the end zone a couple times, I think that's going to be the Ryan Tannehill just getting some passing touchdowns. Maybe he runs one in on an option play or something. So Ryan Tannehill is on my radar as of right now. I have some interest in Kyle Allen at 5,700, but the guy I want to talk about is Derek Carr. So he's at 5K, so he's basically the bare minimum for a starting quarterback. And I know it's not been pretty for Derek Carr. 11, 5, 20, 13, 19, 23. That's not too bad. Neither 17. He's not a high upside play. But by playing Carr, he does unlock a lot of high-end running backs and wide receivers, which I always prefer in cash games. And they are slight dogs here. And this is a pretty good matchup. Tennessee is very stiff versus the run. They are 4th DVOA versus the run, and they're 24th DVOA versus the pass. So, I mean, I'd rather attack Tennessee through the air, and that's what teams have been doing lately. They're allowing 18.7 points per game, but this is a solid 2 quarterbacks, but this is a solid matchup, and Williams and Waller both have solid matchups as well. So I like the Derek Carr to Williams and Waller pairing. I think that's a pretty solid way to go this week for GPPs. Now, it's hard to count on him, but he's been serviceable in good matchups so far. He had 20 versus Cincinnati. That was a pretty good matchup. Sucked versus the Jets. That was a good matchup, but you got to throw that whole game away pretty much. They were so bad. 19 versus Detroit. That was a good matchup. 23 versus Houston. That was a good matchup. 17 versus Green Bay. That's more middle of the road. And really, that's been about it for him. So, I mean, he's been serviceable, but he's a high upside guy, but at 5K, he doesn't have to be. He's going to allow us to fit in guys like McCaffrey, Kamara, those kind of guys. So Derek Carr is on my radar as of right now. And really, I think you could go with a whole bunch of quarterbacks on this slate. I mean, there's just a lot of mid-range options that would make sense. Ryan Fitzpatrick's been fantastic, and he's going up against his old team, the Jets, although he's pretty much almost every team's his old team. But he had a great game last week, great game versus Cleveland. The guy's just a gunslinger. The Jets are really good on the run, are really good versus the run. Pretty sucky versus the pass, so I could see Ryan Fitzpatrick slinging the ball out and have a pretty good game again. So I wouldn't hate going with Ryan Fitzpatrick, but he's a little pricey at 6K. Sam Darnold versus Miami, I think that would make some sense. Tom Brady versus Kansas City. Brissett versus Tampa Bay. So all guys that could be on your radar. I think quarterback's really a mixed bag this week. I think you could go all the way up to Lamar Jackson. I think you could spend all the way down from Derek Carr, and then everyone in between's kind of just meh. And then Deshaun Watson, I think he's going to carry some ownership, and I think he saw it at 6,500. So, but as of right now, I am looking at Lamar, Tannehill, and Derek Carr as being pretty solid plays this week. Now, as for running backs, I think this we get a little bit more interesting here. A lot more better plays in my opinion. So Christian McCaffrey at 10,300. I'm locking him in cash games. I know I said I was going to lock him in last week, and I know he sucked last week with 17 fantasy points, but I'm going right back. It's nice when you can suck and still get 17 fantasy points, and we get a pretty nice $200 discount that we've seen from the past like 4 or 5 weeks with the salary being at 10.5. So I will take the dip at 10,300. And the thing we get with CMC, we get talent, we get efficiency, and we get volume, and that's hard to get for just one player. A lot of guys have 2 of those 3 qualities, or maybe just 1. McCaffrey has all 3, and he's averaging 27.42 touches per game, which is first. 19.58 rushing attempts per game, second. 12 rushing touchdowns, first. 4 receiving touchdowns, third. 7.83 targets per game, first. Pascal Kamara, 21% target share, which is tied for first. Massive 150 yards total per game, which is first by over 20 yards from the next guy. The dude's just insane. I mean, I know he had a pretty down week last week versus Washington, but versus Atlanta, I have a hard time seeing him not have another good game. In a blowout last week 11 versus Atlanta, he didn't score a touchdown, but he had 15 targets, 11 catches, 121 yards on the air, 14 for 70 on the ground. Still scored 33 fantasy points in a blowout without scoring a touchdown. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to get 15 targets again, but that's the upside he shows every single week. He's going to get you near 30 touches. Falcons in the middle of the road, but I don't care about matchups when it comes to CMC. He destroyed a New Orleans. I shouldn't say he destroyed them, 22 for 64 on the ground, but he was great through the air, 9 targets, 9 catches, 69 yards, 34 fantasy points, and 2 touchdowns. CMC, I don't see how you fade him versus Atlanta here. It's pretty easy to fit him in this week. There's enough value to do so. So CMC is someone I'm definitely locking in for my cash games this week. Then scrolling down the list here, I had a lot of interest in Dalvin Cook on my first look video, but I'm going to stay away from that situation, especially in cash games, considering I don't know how banged up he actually is. Maybe he re-aggravates it and leaves the game. I can't take those unnecessary risks in cash games, so I'll find the extra 800 to get up from Dalvin Cook to Christian McCaffrey. I have no problem with that. If Dalvin Cook was 100% to go, I'd say I'd probably want to play him, not maybe over CMC, but I think he'd be right up there in terms of just being the best play point per dollar. But it's still a situation I'm not really looking at targeting this week, just because I think it could be a little messy and they might want to just get Alexander Madison more involved, and it could become more of a timeshare because you want to keep Dalvin Cook healthy. So probably going to have to pass on that situation. But Derrick Henry, 8,200. So I do like Derrick Henry this week, limited practice, but he'll be fine. He's going to be on the field. And I'll be honest, I was a little late to the Derrick Henry being elite train, but, that's just what he is. He has been absolutely dominant. And I did play him versus Jacksonville, so don't think I was too late and missed out on that game. That was a pretty obvious play for week 12 versus Jacksonville. But this guy has impressed me a ton. I'm definitely on the Derrick Henry train at this point. And they're riding their workhorse, and it's been working. They've been winning. So, they beat Kansas City, they beat Jacksonville, they beat Indianapolis. They're surging right now, and it's on the back of Derrick Henry. He's got over 1,100 yards this year. He's got 13 touchdowns. He's getting 95 yards per game. Nothing not to like here about Derrick Henry. And past 4 games, he's averaging 30 points per game, over 20 touches per game, and around 140 rushing yards per game. He's also impossible to tackle. The dude's a straight freight train running at people, and I do think Tennessee can win this game, so I like the game script potentially for him. And they do have a decently high implied team total of about 25, and Oakland is 26 DVA versus the run, allowing 25 points per game. So Derrick Henry, I know he's a little expensive here, most expensive he's been all season, but I still think he's a pretty solid play. Do I think he's more of a GPP play than cash? Yes, just because he's not a big pass catcher, but the guy's, you can pretty much bank on him scoring a touchdown or 2 and getting 100 plus yards in this matchup. So Derrick Henry, I think he's a fine play. I do typically like to have my running backs being able to be pass catchers in cash games, especially at this price tag, but I think he's just such a safe play on the ground. I definitely think you could go there, but I definitely think he's a great play this week. So Derrick Henry, do like him. Leonard Fournette, 7,800. Speaking of pass catchers, that's going to be Leonard Fournette. It's just another straight workhorse, and that's what I want out of my running backs. He's averaging 25 touches per game, which is only behind Christian McCaffrey. 120 total yards per game, which is third. 6.75 targets per game, which is fourth. 23 targets the past 2 weeks. 23 targets for Leonard Fournette the past 2 weeks. He's making wide receivers jealous with this kind of targets. And he's had 41 targets since week 8. One of the safest plays every single week. If you just look at his game log, he's a rock solid safe play. 18, 36, 12, 12, 20, 19, 17, 26, 29, 15, 12, 12. You're getting double-digit points with upside of more. Versus Tennessee, 24 carries, 12 targets. That's just kind of the volume you can get with Leonard Fournette on a weekly basis. Last week was a tough matchup versus Tampa Bay on the ground. But he still had 11 targets, 9 catches, which made him a pretty solid play. But we get a very good matchup this week versus the Chargers. They are 27th DVOA versus the run and are allowing 27.1 points per game to running backs. He's pretty much CMC light. I say that because he's just going to get all the volume in the world through the air and on the ground. He's not going to really pop off like Christian McCaffrey is on a weekly basis, nor is he as consistent and has that high ceiling. But he's the light version of Christian McCaffrey. You're going to get a ton of volume no matter what. So definitely like Leonard Fournette this week. I think he's a solid RB2 to pair with Christian McCaffrey. You get all those targets, all those touches. You could get potentially 60 plus touches out of these two guys if they get over 30. So definitely like Leonard Fournette. And also like Alvin Kamara here. He comes in at 7K. And this is just really a buy low here, as I find him just way too cheap. And this is actually the cheapest he's been since 2017. Trust me, I went all the way back and looked. Through the 2018 salaries, he was not even close to this price. And then he hasn't been this price since like early 2017. And I like buying people low. You got to buy people low, and then sell it high. I don't like buying guys high unless you're Christian McCaffrey. You deserve to be high forever. Obviously, but Alvin Kamara at 7K, I will take some shares of this. I will say this is a tough matchup, though. San Francisco is allowing 17 points per game, which is second fewest, but they're also 14th DVA versus the run, so it's not absolutely unstoppable. But the main thing here I'm interested in is his involvement in the passing game. His last 5 games played, he has 45 targets, so we always have that safe floor with Alvin Kamara. 8, 9, 10, 10. That's just the things he can do every single week. The problem this year, though, with him is why his ceiling hasn't been that high and that we've all been disappointed with him. Because, trust me, I drafted him 3rd overall in my redraft league, and I've been disappointed with Alvin Kamara. It's because he's not scoring touchdowns. His last touchdown was week 3 versus Seattle. And that's the only one he has this year. He's usually a monster touchdown guy, so I'd expect that to regress to the mean here at some point. But the guy just is not scoring touchdowns at all. He had a rushing touchdown versus Seattle and a receiving touchdown, and that's been it. Other than that, that's no touchdowns, which is very unlike Alvin Kamara. He's usually a touchdown monster, so positive regression is due here. And despite not being a workhorse back on the ground, he's only getting, 12 carries a game. He's still 12th in total touches per game because of his high involvement in the passing game, like I said, every single week. And the dude is one of the most talented running backs in the NFL, especially in open space. You just have to hope that Taysom Hill doesn't steal these touchdowns, which is definitely possible. I hate Taysom Hill. I know he's good for the Saints, but man, Taysom Hill makes me so mad for fantasy purposes. I'm sure you guys feel the same way. He screwed me on Thanksgiving. I had Kamara, I had Thomas, I had Breeze. It was the Taysom Hill show because, of course, that's what Sean Payton does. So just mentally prepared to hate Taysom Hill on Sunday if you end up playing Alvin Kamara. But I do like the buy low price on Kamara. He just seems a little bit too cheap. Then scrolling down a little bit here, I like Devonta Freeman. He comes in at 5,400, and he gets that juicy matchup versus the Carolina Panthers. And really, it's just I'll play any running back versus Carolina. First game back, he played 67% of the snaps last week and put up 10 points versus an elite Saints run defense, so it could have been worse. But this Carolina defense is so bad versus the run. They are 31st DVOA versus the rush, allowing 30.7 points per game to running backs, 120 rushing yards per game, and 1.58 rushing touchdowns per game, which might not sound like a lot, but it is comparatively to the rest of the teams in the NFL. And he's cheap. He's a good pass catcher, and he fits easily as an RB3 or flex option. So Devonta Freeman, I think he's an excellent mid-range option this week, and I think he's got a pretty safe floor. I think he gets you double-digit points. If he gets to the end zone, you could be looking around 20 points versus Carolina. So I do like Devonta Freeman quite a bit. And if you're going all the way down at running back this week, I think he's going to be popular this week. Patrick Laird. I don't know if you guys saw the interview. I forget who did the interview with him, but I actually watched it, and it was pretty interesting. He's a pretty cool guy. So I'd recommend watching that. I don't remember the guy's name who did the interview, so you'd have to look it up, but I'm sure it'd pop up. I think it was on YouTube. But he's a pretty cool dude. But anyway, he's the punt running back of the week. Kalen Ballage is gone, and he played 60% of the snaps last week. So Patrick Laird has a stronghold as the starting running back. I don't think he's going to do much damage on the ground here versus the Jets. Their second DVOA versus the run. But he's a pretty good pass catcher, so I could see a lot of dump-offs for Patrick Laird. He had 5 targets last week, and he's just a solid punt play. I mean, I expect him to be popular. If you can't get up to Freeman, I'd have no problem going down with Laird, because I usually like to play 3 running backs in cash games, so I could definitely see him being a candidate for my flex spot, or him or Freeman, more than likely. I think I'll probably go like CMC, and then like a Fournette, Henry, or Kamara as my RB2. Then I'll probably go with someone like Laird or Freeman in my flex spot, unless I can pay up for all 3 running backs. I'll definitely try to do that, but he's definitely a candidate for my flex spot this week. So Patrick Laird, I like the receiving upside, and I'm expect him to have some ownership this week. All right, that's going to be it for the running backs. We can go over to the wide receivers now. And so Michael Thomas, obviously he's always a good play, but it's a tough matchup versus San Francisco. Tyreek Hill, I don't target wide receiver 1s versus New England no matter who you are. But let's talk about Davante Adams here. He comes in at 8K. I liked him a lot last week. He was also a lot less expensive last week, so at 8K I'd expect his ownership to dip here. But I still like him. He's a model of consistency. You get talent, you get volume, and you get a future Hall of Fame quarterback throwing you the ball. Not a lot more you can ask for out of a wide receiver. The last 5 games, he has 58 targets, double-digit targets every single game in that 5-week span. And if you just look at his game log, 24, 10 targets, 12 targets, 19 points, 10 targets, 21 points, 11 targets, 11 points, 15 targets. I didn't even add that Philly game. 15 targets versus Philly, 31 points. Yeah, I'm going to trust Davante Adams to have a pretty good game here versus Washington. He owns a 28% target share, 67% weighted opportunity share, 35% market share of the team's air yards. Packers also have a 27-point implied team total, which is one of the higher totals on the slate, and it's a good matchup too. Washington is 21st DVOA versus the pass. I think Davante Adams is an excellent play at wide receiver if you want to spend up this week. Now, personally, I have a hard time seeing myself being able to fit in Davante Adams because I'm going to prioritize guys like CMC, probably Lamar Jackson, and like one of the like Fournette or something like that, or Derrick Henry over Davante Adams. But if you can afford him, I think he's a pretty solid play this week. So I have no problem if you want to go with Adams. Although a guy I think I like a little bit better because he's a little bit cheaper, and by a little bit I mean $1,700 cheaper. It's Odell. So I know I said I like Jarvis Landry because he's pretty much the wide receiver 1 at this point, but I think I'm going to sucker myself into losing money with Odell this week because he comes in at $6,300. And he's a guy who can only play in good matchups at this point, but this is a pretty good matchup. He's also very cheap, and he's been pretty all right in good matchups this year. He had 31 points versus the Jets in a good matchup, and then he had 19 versus Seattle, which was also a good matchup. Then he had 20 versus Miami, which was the second best game of the year. So this is another good matchup versus Cincy, and I can see him having a pretty good game here. And plus, I feel like this is a game where they go out of their way to make him happy. And I got to be honest, he's had a pretty rough schedule. I mean, Pittsburgh's not easy. Pittsburgh again, Buffalo, Denver, New England, San Francisco, Baltimore, the Rams. Tennessee's a pretty good matchup. But he's had a pretty gauntlet of a tough schedule. So, I mean, it's softening up here versus Cincinnati. And like I said, I feel like they're going to go out of their way to make him happy. There's been a lot of speculation in the Cleveland media right now about if he's happy with being on the Browns. And I think they're going to go out of their way here to make it a point to get Odell the ball here and have a big game and shut everyone up. He himself said he's pretty happy to be here, but I just feel like they're going to go out of their way to get Odell the ball. I mean, he's still seeing consistent targets. They just haven't been as efficient as Jarvis Landry's. Him and Landry and Baker have the better connection right now, but Odell's obviously uber talented. And this is actually the second cheapest price he's been all season, so I like buying people low. And since he's 31st DVA versus the pass, and he will see the majority of snaps against B.W. Webb, the corner for Cincinnati, according to PFF, who has allowed 2.12 yards per route covered this year, which is 4th most in the NFL. And like I said, Jarvis has definitely taken over as the wide receiver 1 at this point, to be honest, but he's still getting his fair share of targets here. They just haven't been very efficient. He still has a 25% target share, 63% weighted opportunity share, and a 37% market share of the team's air yards. So Odell, I think he's a pretty good play this week at $6,300. He's pretty affordable, and if he's your wide receiver 1, I feel fine with that. If he's your wide receiver 2, I feel amazing with that. Matchup versus Cincinnati, I don't have too much concerns about that there. So Odell, I think he's a very solid play this week. So definitely think he's one of the top plays for cash games. And then scrolling down a bit, I think Tyler Boyd's fine versus Cleveland. James Washington versus Arizona seems a bit expensive. But Zach Pascal at 5,500, I think he's a pretty good play. T.Y. Hilton is yet to practice, and I think I was writing some of these notes down beforehand, but I believe he just got ruled out a couple hours ago. So T.Y. Hilton's not playing, and he actually played 100% of the snaps last week for Zach Pascal. It doesn't get better than that. 100% of the snaps, so he's on the field the whole game. And he had 10 targets, 109 yards, and 20.9 fantasy points. Not too bad. Average 15 yards a catch. We have a decently high implied total in this game as well. They're 47.5 over under, and the Colts are dogs on the road. I think I just hit my mic. I think we're still good. Okay. So yeah, like I said, pretty high total here, and there should be a more pass-heavy attack for the Colts versus a pass-funnel defense in Tampa Bay. They're 19th DVOA versus the pass and 1st DVOA versus the run. So I'd much rather pass on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers than I would run. Although I will say Tampa Bay's defense has been pretty solid lately, but I still don't think it's that great of a defense. They're allowing 48.8 points per game to wide receivers, which is most in the NFL. Allowing 204 receiving yards per game and 1.58 touchdowns per game to wide receivers. So I think Zach Pascal is a very, very good option at 5,500. Definitely wouldn't mind him as my wide receiver 2 or even my wide receiver 3, just depending on who I spend up for. So I do think he's a very good option, and I'm very thirsty. So 1 second. This is watermelon. I don't even like watermelon. The flavor, I love watermelon, the fruit, but the flavor is not that great, but the post is very good. That's all we had in the fridge. All right. So, yes, like I said, Zach Pascal is a very, very good option. Then going down slightly here, I think that Jameson Crowder at 5,300 is a pretty solid play this week. He's not a high ceiling guy, but he's actually flashed 20-point upside. But I think he's a solid, safe play for cash games. He's had 2 bad games in a row where he had, 2 points and 3 points, but the targets were still there. He had 9 targets and 4 targets, so it's not like he wasn't getting targeted. Just didn't really turn into anything. And he actually had his second best game of the year versus Miami. Was it week 9, I believe? Yeah, week 9 versus Miami. He had 83 yards, a touchdown, had 22 fantasy points, 8 catches. Not saying he's going to absolutely replicate that, but I do think he can get you 15-plus points in this matchup, especially if he finds the end zone. He's got a pretty healthy 22% target share as well, getting about 7 targets per game, and Miami is 32nd DVOA versus the pass. So I think Jameson Crowder is a very, very good play this week, and I have no problem putting him in your cash game lineups. And I think I'm starting to lose my voice here, so hopefully we can keep it through the end of this video. I think we're getting close. We just got a few more wide receivers and some tight ends to talk about then. Get to the end. But Tyrone Williams, I think he's a decent pairing with Derek Carr this week. And look, I know he has been very, very bad. He had a great start to the season where he was 25, 15, 11, 12, 18. Now he's taken a nosedive. But pairing up with the Carr, it's only a 10K salary stack, and I don't hate it this week. Like I said, Tennessee is very bad versus the pass when I was talking about Derek Carr. And the Raiders may struggle to run the ball here, especially if they're going to be trailing in this game. And Tennessee is 24th DVOA versus the pass. They're allowing 35 points per game to wide receivers. And Renfro being out, leaving behind a 15% target share, which just opens up more targets. And I just think he's a solid pairing this week. I wouldn't say he's an absolute core play for me. If I was doing my presentation, I probably wouldn't have him on here. I'd probably have him in the end where I do my other targets. But since I don't have that, I am talking about him right now. So I think Tyrone Williams is a pretty solid play this week. Probably not a cash game guy, but I do think he's definitely GPP worthy. Then Curtis Samuel, he's just really cheap going up against Atlanta. He's not a core play for me by any means, which is not, I'm not going to talk about him too long. But I've seen consistent targets every single week. He's dirt cheap. He's got upside. And Greg Olsen is out, so it just opens up some more targets going around. So I wouldn't mind Curtis Samuel at only 4,900. I'd rather play him than DJ Moore just because DJ Moore is so expensive this week. But I actually have one more play at wide receiver, and it's a dirt cheap option, and you might be able to unlock a lot of salary relief this week. So we have Paris Campbell at 3,200. He is going to be playing. Coach Frank Reich confirmed it, that he will be available to play. We'll see how much he plays, but he was a full participant this week. And he wasn't restricted, so I think he should be fully good to go. And they're going to need him because T.Y. Hilton is out, like I said. And so I think we can fire up near min price. He's got an elite matchup, like I said, with Zach Pascal. He should, like I said, it should be a more pass-heavy attack versus a pass-funnel defense. I already went over all those numbers, so I'm not going to repeat them, but they are the worst defense in the NFL versus wide receivers. Wide receivers have good games versus them every single week. And Last game he played, which was week 9, he had 62% of the snaps, had 5 targets, 5 catches, 13 fantasy points. And it's not like that was his only game he's done anything. Week 4 versus Oakland, he had 8 targets and 3 targets in his first couple of games of his NFL career. But Paris Campbell, I think he's a pretty good play at 3,200. I'm not saying he's going to be like some elite automatic 15, 20 point guy, but at 3,200, you don't need that much, and he's going to allow you to fit in guys like McCaffrey, Leonard Fournette, Lamar Jackson. So Paris Campbell, definitely don't hate him at 3,200. I definitely think he's worth a flyer. We're almost to the end, so bear with me. But at tight end, I think there's 3 or 4 guys I'm going to talk about. 4 guys I'll hit on, but I have 3 main ones. So I'm just going to go down the list here in terms of salary. So Darren Waller at 5,800. If I'm spending up, this is probably where I'm going to go. I like the pairing of him with Carr this week and possibly running it back with Derrick Henry. I think that's a pretty solid stack this week because by doing that, you're assuming the Raiders are going to be throwing the ball quite a bit and Derrick Henry is going to be running the ball a lot because the Tennessee Titans are up. So that's a good correlation stack. And he did get back on track last week after some disappointing games in a row where he had 9 targets and 20 points on 100 receiving yards. It's actually a pretty good matchup versus Tennessee. We saw Jack Doyle have a really good game versus them last week. I believe he scored 19 fantasy points, and they're giving up 13.7 points per game to tight ends, which is 8th most in the NFL. He's also top 3 in major categories like market share of the air yards, target share, and weighted opportunity share of all tight ends. So the volume's going to be there, the talent's there. It's a good matchup. I think the Raiders are going to be throwing the ball quite a bit, so I think Darren Waller is actually a pretty solid play this week. My mouth's so dry. I think it's because I had a lot of bacon this morning, so a lot of sodium, so probably why I'm so thirsty. All right, but scrolling down the list here, I had Jack Doyle at 4,600. So he's before Greg Olsen got ruled out, he was my favorite tight end this week, but I think there's some more value that opened up. But there's no T.Y. Hilton, there's no Eric Ebron, so Doyle should have another solid game like he did last week. He had 11 targets last week, which was a season high, 19 points, which was a season high, and he played 94% of the snaps, which is also a season high. So just such a coincidence that all these guys are out and he starts to have his best game. And the guy's talented too. I think he's a pretty safe play. And this is a very good matchup. I think the Colts are going to be throwing the ball quite a bit versus Tampa Bay. I talked about a lot of Colts this week, but a lot of them are just pretty cheap here in good matchup. They're allowing 16 points per game to tight ends, which is 4th most in the NFL. So Jack Doyle, I think he's a pretty solid, safe play at 4,600 this week. And then Vance McDonald, he's not a core play for me, but I definitely think he's worth a look because he's playing Arizona. And it's a real thing. It's not just something fluky at this point. It's been 13 weeks in a row. Arizona sucks versus the tight end position. Tyler Higbee was the number 1 scoring tight end last week, and he was 2,500. Vance McDonald, I know he's not been good this year, and he's got Devin Hodges throwing in the ball, but it would not surprise me if he ended the game with like 40 to 50 yards and 1 to 2 touchdowns just because Arizona is so bad versus the pass. Now, trust me, I'd rather find the extra 300 to fit Jack Doyle in, but if you only have 4,300 left for your tight end spot, I definitely don't mind Vance McDonald just because of how bad Arizona is versus the tight end position. They're allowing 21 points per game, which is dead last, and it's just, they're such a sieve versus the tight end, so definitely have Vance McDonald on my radar. Not a core play for me just because I prefer Jack Doyle, but he's definitely on my radar. Then the last guy we're going to talk about on this video is dirt cheap, 2,500. He's going to be this week's Tyler Higbee. Is he going to score as much as Tyler Higbee? Probably not, but he's 2,500, and he's going to be the starting tight end because the starting original tight end got hurt. So Jared Everett, he was out last week. Greg Olsen, he just got ruled out about an hour ago. So that made Ian Thomas the cheap cash game tight end of the week. And he's just the bare minimum. Greg Olsen's out, so he's going to start. And he had a limited run last week, but he still had 4 targets, 4 catches, 24 yards. Not bad for bare minimum price, and he got 6.4 points. If he replicates that, I'll take it all day. 6 points at 2,500, I would take it because he's allowing me to fit in guys like CMC, Derrick Henry, those kind of guys. And I know I don't like stacking cash, but I have no problem if you want to play Christian McCaffrey and Ian Thomas because Thomas is dirt cheap. So that's really just the main reasoning here. Now, Atlanta's more middle of the road versus tight ends, but I don't really care. He's bare minimum. I don't really respect the Atlanta defense too much, so it's nothing to be scared of. So Ian Thomas is definitely on my radar at this point. I would expect him to have a lot of ownership this week. But anyway, guys, I think that's going to be it for this video. I felt like that was a really long video, and I know I am tired. I think I got bags under my eyes. So I'm going to relax for a little bit. I'm going to work on some NBA, and then Tomorrow morning or late tonight, I will get the lineup building video out. So make sure you watch this video before the lineup building video. And that makes no sense because you just watched this video if you're listening to this right now. So just disregard what I said. But just know you have that to look forward to coming up. And then that'll be my last NFL video of the week. Well, my jaw is hurting, so I'm going to stop talking. Wish you guys the best of luck. And remember to subscribe to the channel. I really would like to get to 3K this weekend. That would be awesome. Do appreciate all the support on this channel. Remember to leave a like. And that's pretty much it. Check out the spreadsheets if you want to, and I'll see you guys in the next video.